Max Verstappen in a complete league of his own on Saturday at the Austrian Grand Prix, first winning the sprint race and then backing it up a few hours later by claiming pole position for Sunday's race. Elsewhere, a decision made by the stewards has an instrumental impact on Sunday's Grand Prix. From RacingNews365.com, my name is Nick Golding and I'm joined, as always, by lead editor Ian Parks. Ian, a lot to discuss this evening. Let's start with Max, though, because yesterday on Friday he was dominant. Today he was in a complete league of his own, in qualifying in particular, claiming pole by 0.4 of a second across a lap that only takes 65 seconds. Another truly tremendous day for the reigning world champion.
I'm going to go so far as to suggest, Nick, that was one of the most complete and perfect qualifying performances that I think I have seen in all my years covering Formula One. It was just absolutely sublime. When Max pulled into the pit lane at the end of that qualifying performance, he said himself that on fire. That's exactly how he and his car together in perfect harmony came across. Just sublime, as I say. Christian Horner said it was mighty. And bear in mind that he'd won the sprint race earlier in the day. That wasn't at a canter, but ultimately it proved to be the case once he'd had a little bit of a ding-dong with Lando Norris and came out the right side of that. But that qualifying performance for me, just brilliant. Q2, he delivered a brilliant first lap. He went quicker again on his second run in Q2. In Q3, he went even faster again. And just when you thought that arguably, surely that's it, there can't be anything left on the table, lo and behold, he produces yet another faster lap. And what makes this even more significant is that this is one of the shortest circuits on the calendar. Most certainly it's the shortest in terms of lap time, 65 seconds for a lap. To finish 0.4 of a second ahead of his nearest rival, which in this case was again Lando in the McLaren, and around a 64-second lap. Unbelievable. Genuinely, I don't think I've seen too many better performances than that, as I said, across all my career.
I think it is even probably one of the best, if not the best, qualifying performance since this format of qualifying was introduced. And I think it was 2006, but I'm more than happy to be wrong. Might be 2005. But let's look at the sprint race for a couple of minutes, because something that was very crucial there is obviously Max started on pole. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri remained within DRS of him for the first half. And obviously at one point, Lando did get ahead only for a few seconds before Max immediately reclaimed the lead down the inside of turn 4. We've heard drivers in the past say that with Max, the only way to beat him is to kind of get in his face, to overtake him quickly, disrupt his rhythm, which Lando tried to do. But Max instantly fought back into the lead. And as soon as he got back into the lead, that was it. Job done. He cruised into the distance.
I mean, Lando described himself as stupid and an amateur for the move that he made, because on the face of it, it looks like it was a brilliant move. Got within DRS, going up the hill towards the sharp right-hander turn 3, but he came from too deep. And that kind of then left Max who was taking the ideal line through turn 3, but obviously he had to let Lando through on his inside. But coming out of turn 3, then of course with the DRS open again, on the long straight down to turn 4, he managed to get in the slipstream, although actually he didn't have DRS. I've just realised, to apologise, he didn't actually have DRS on that rundown because he wasn't allowed it. But nevertheless, he managed to get right behind Lando because of, as I say, how deep Lando had gone. So he got into the slipstream and basically did a superb move to get him back into turn 4. But of course, Lando turned around and said that another mistake again, he'd left the door wide open for Max. In doing that, he then also allowed his teammate Oscar to come out of turn 4, go through turn 5, and eventually out of turn 6, Oscar managed to pass him as well. So Lando went basically from first to third in a matter of about 10 or 15 seconds. But from there on in, it was just another perfectly executed drive. Oscar managed to stay within DRS range for a few laps, but ultimately, once Max managed to break that, then it was an easy run to the finish for him. And again, just another great performance. 3 straight sprint victories now this season from 3. And he opened that gap just a little bit further on Lando Norris, bearing in mind Lando was third by the end of it. So gained 2 points on Lando there. And then, as I say, just went into qualifying on an absolute high and just delivered a consummate performance.
Yeah, and it does seem as well, based on what we've kind of seen of race pace, that McLaren's only hope, or anyone's only hope, of beating Max is just staying within the 1 second for DRS. Because as soon as Max breaks the 1 second barrier, there is no catching him. Quickly to run through the top 10 from the sprint race, because really that's kind of all that happened. All fairness, it was very much a ding-dong between Verstappen and the Red Bulls. Verstappen obviously won with Piastri in second, Lando Norris in third, George Russell in fourth, Sainz fifth, Hamilton sixth, Leclerc in seventh, Sergio Perez in P8, I think 17 seconds or so behind Max, Kevin Magnussen P9, and Lance Stroll in P10. But on to qualifying and sticking with McLaren, obviously Lando Norris was the closest driver to Max and starts second. Provisionally, it was going to be Oscar Piastri in third, until his lap was deleted. And the reason why we're actually recording this several hours after qualifying is McLaren appealed Oscar Piastri's lap deletion, because he now starts in P7. And obviously, with the circuit being as short as it is, this has a instrumental impact on McLaren's race tomorrow and their strategy of how they're going to compete with Max. Because all of a sudden, Lando now, with Oscar's appeal being rejected by the stewards, it is Lando against Max. There is no Oscar in the wings, in the shadows, to try and support Lando.
Yeah, I think we also have to mention as well, Nick, that the stewards also investigated Max Verstappen.
They did.
For driving unnecessarily slowly.
And Lewis Hamilton.
And Lewis Hamilton. So coming out of qualifying, we had first and third. Well, first from Max, and obviously McLaren trying to get Oscar reinstated back into third, because, as you've mentioned, he had his final lap deleted, which would have given him third place on the grid. Instead, he will start seventh. So initially, the stewards looked at Max for driving unnecessarily slowly. They decided no action was required. And on the basis, and I'm just going to refer to the stewards document because it's the easiest thing for me to do, because there was so many stewards documents issued afterwards that it's hard to remember exactly the exact wording of all of those. So they basically said that Max exited the pit slowly and made up a gap of approximately 14 seconds to the car in front of him. The stewards determined that in this case, no other car was directly affected by this in their attempts to set a lap time. In addition to that, it is noted that other cars were making similar gaps on track at this point in time. However, as this type of incident could, in different circumstances, potentially prevent other drivers from setting a lap time at the end of a session, the stewards recommend that consideration be given to setting a maximum gap time during qualifying. So it wasn't just a simple, the reason why I've read that out is it wasn't just a simple case of open and shut. No, basically now, stemming from that, the FIA is now going to have a look at what to do going forward in the future to ensure that there's no repeat of what Max did. And then obviously going to the McLaren one, highly significant, as you've mentioned, because it now means Oscar, rather than from starting P3, he will now be P7. And as you've rightly pointed out, it means Lando does not have, although if you look at the sprint race, in fairness, Nick, Oscar overtook Lando.
He did.
You can't really call it a rear gunner or right wingman in this case, because Oscar was there in the sprint challenging
he was.
A for the second position, and then he also challenged for the victory. But yes, I know what you're referring to.
The alternate strategy is now for cards. Yeah.
There's no McLaren wall there to stop the other guys from trying to come through. I get what you're saying. So specifically with regard to the McLaren protest, and this is quite significant. White took quite so long in the end when you read the
2
steward's
hours.
verdict. 2 hours. Basically, with regard to admissibility of a protest, the stewards note that it did not specify any relevant regulations, which in this case it should be Article 13.4.1. It did not specify against whom the protest was lodged, and it did not identify the concerns of the protesting party. So the bottom line was that the protest did not meet several of the required criteria for the admissibility of a protest. Significantly as well, this is the key point, Nick, a decision of the stewards is not open to protest. So it's like, well, what's the point then? What's the point? If it's a steward's decision, so surely someone somewhere must have known, well, it's a steward's decision, so we can't protest it. And I'm pretty certain we've had something like this before, because the key point is we've had all these new track limits elements enforced to prevent a repeat of what we had last year, which was 1,200 infringements and a ridiculous amount of time spent looking into those. We had numerous penalties, and we had a race classification 5 hours after last year's Grand Prix. It was evidently clear that something had to be done for this year's race going forward. Something has been done. We've got new elements, as I say, introduced at predominantly at turns 9 and 10, but at other turns on the track as well. Turn 6, a little bit different. This is where Oscar was adjudged to have gone beyond the track limits, but boy was it marginal. You've only got to look at the replays, the onboards, and it really, really is marginal. So you can only assume that the stewards must have had a different angle than compared to what we have seen via the broadcast. So at the end of the day, bottom line is protest was inadmissible. You can't protest the steward's decision. Go figure. And 7th. And yes, Lando is now there to attack Max. What George can do from 3rd, though, who knows? George is confident. George Russell, 3rd place in his Mercedes. He's confident. He has good race pace. He said himself after qualifying that the car has been more set up for the race than for qualifying. So he's going to feel pretty good that he came out of qualifying with this 3rd place. Does he have an opportunity himself to go at Lando, to go at Max? We'll see.
Yeah, it'd definitely be interesting to see an angry Oscar coming from P7, because he's kind of looked like a bit like his old self again, because he had a very disappointing Spanish Grand Prix, but seemingly very much back. He's bounced back, which is kind of what Red Bull been wanting Sergio Perez to do, but I think we'll discuss him and leave him for tomorrow and Monday, because I think our viewers are getting a bit tired of Sergio Perez being discussed. So quickly to go through the top 10 on the grid, it's Max Verstappen on pole with Lando Russell, that's a new one. Lando Norris in 2nd, hey, Russell in 3rd, Carlos Sainz in 4th, Hamilton 5th, Leclerc 6th, Piastri 7th, Sergio Perez P8, Nico Hulkenberg in P9, Esteban Ocon in P10. Next thing, Yuki Tsunoda. He was a bit of a very naughty boy, said some quite disgusting language. It is being polite, and rightly so. He has been punished.
Yeah, and again, I'm opening up the steward's document because we do need to make reference to it, because yes, he came out with a very derogatory remark, one that I have no intention of repeating here. Obviously, in a video broadcast, it has been reported, of course, and the stewards have taken, quite rightly, an extremely dim view. Basically, bottom line is that Yuki came out with this comment during Q1 when he appeared to get balked in the pit lane by, I think it might have been Valtteri Bottas in the stake. And the stewards have basically handed Yuki a €40,000 fine, of which 20,000 is suspended for the remainder of this season on condition that no infringement of a similar nature occurs. Now, of course, Yuki's, no stranger to making 4-letter remarks over the radio. We've heard many, many before, but this one was in particularly derogatory because it was ableist. And again, as I say, I'm not going to repeat the wording that he came out with. Now, I'm just going to read out what the stewards said so that the viewers have a good idea as to what came out. So it said, during the hearing, the driver was very apologetic and explained that because English is not his first language, he was unaware until after the session what the meaning of the words used is in the English language. He said that he was horrified when he learned this. He contended that his understanding of the words was different, but acknowledged that this should not be considered as an excuse for what he did. The stewards appreciate the honesty of the driver, but reinforce the fact the words used are offensive and wholly inappropriate. To have used such words over a platform that is available to the public amounted to misconduct as defined in the International Sporting Code. And that is why the stewards have determined that a severe fine is required, but they also take into account the genuine remorse of the driver and his offer to issue a public apology. So, yeah, really, really strong punishment there from the FIA. I'm sure our viewers and readers will have a judgment on it, a comment on it. We have to take Yuki at his word. The stewards quite clearly have taken Yuki at his word with regard to his apology. Did he genuinely know what he was saying? Was it something that he was just repeated from something that he might have heard in the past? We don't know, but as I've just read out in that steward's document, they have taken his apology on board and they're satisfied with that. So we can only assume that that's the end of this matter. But I can imagine for Yuki, it's one that he's going to deeply, deeply regret for quite some time.
I'd also obviously hope he does obviously regret what he says, and most importantly, has learned from the huge mistake that he has made. And it's nice to see as well the stewards and the FIA coming down on it so severely. Looking ahead to Sunday, of course, a bit of a weird race. Looking ahead, given out that obviously Oscar is in P7, and we kind of all thought that it's going to be the two McLarens against Verstappen. Perhaps that's kind of changed a little bit now, given that Oscar has the two Ferraris and the two Mercedes drivers to get past. So we obviously saw today that if Lando can save in 1 second of Max, that he has a chance. But it does seem that Max's race pace, when he's out beyond the 1 second window, is just leaps and bounds above everybody else.
Yeah, I think Lando will know that his best opportunity is going to be in those first few laps once DRS is enabled. He's got as I say, he's got a chance. He knows where he went wrong in the sprint. He's openly admitted that. So we will not see him making that same mistake twice. I think what we're going to see tomorrow is going to be, if he does have the opportunity, it will be a more measured attempt to try and get past Max, rather than going for, as I say, what was a brilliant overtake on the face of it, but ultimately it came from too far back. Yeah. So, yes, he has a chance, but with the pace of that RB20, with the way Max is in complete and total harmony with that car, it's very, very hard to look beyond anything other than a complete clean sweep of this weekend for Max Verstappen, and him coming away with another 25, potentially 26 points if he also scores the fastest lap point as well.
And a grand slam.
There are chances. George is in third, Carlos is in fourth, 4 different cars in the first 4 places. It could be totally fascinating. I don't think the Ferraris have got the race pace, and I think they've admitted that themselves, both Carlos and Charles Leclerc. Word on Lewis as well, very quickly, because obviously he was another one that came under the eye of the stewards.
He was.
Started Q3 on his first lap, pulled out of the garage, and he was dragging behind a jack and the exhaust extractor pipe as well behind him, very quickly told to stop. And ultimately it was an unsafe release call. Thankfully, he was told to stop super quickly, which he did, and €5,000 fine for the team. So that pretty much clears up all of the stewards' action that they were involved with post qualifying today. So yeah, very busy qualifying. Looking ahead to the race, as I say, I've briefly summed it up there. I think it's going to be very, very hard, even for Lando, to win that one ahead of Max. But if he's learned his lesson, then maybe there's an opportunity there for him.
Yeah, I definitely think with all the stewards' decisions we've had today and the length of time we've had to wait, I was getting flashbacks to the Canadian Grand Prix and waiting until 2:30 in the morning British time. That was pretty painful. Very quickly, Ian, a bold prediction. Mine is that we're not even going to see the first lap because the orange fog is going to be too thick.
That's a hell of a prediction. And, well, they're not allowed to have those flares.
I know they're not allowed, but given that I think today 90% of the fans in attendance were wearing orange, which means they are Max Verstappen supporters or potentially McLaren fans. You never know. You don't know. But I've got a feeling the first lap scenes are going to be pretty incredible from the grandstands.
If not the first lap, then certainly we're probably not going to get a second. That being the case, once all those orange flares have gone off. Bold prediction. As I say, it's not very bold. It's going to be a Max victory. And I can't see beyond a Max Lando 1-2, to be honest. It's just a question of who will take the third place on the podium.
Oscar Piastri.
You're going to go for Oscar? You think?
I'm going to go for Oscar. I think he's got the pace.
He's going to be, as you mentioned earlier, he's going to be quite fired up. He was extremely disappointed in the pen, speaking afterwards. Very unhappy with that call that was made. And rightly so. I mean... the fact that you can't protest something like that, surely that's a regulation that needs looking at. Surely.
Yeah.
If the stewards have come out and said with regard to Max, well, bearing in mind what he did, we're now recommending that now needs to be looked at in the future to prevent something similar. Well, surely this is key for McLaren at the end of the day. They've got a driver that could have started third, and he's going to start seventh. So it's a big deal. And I think there should be an avenue open to look at something like that. We have all this technology now, and McLaren felt they had, something to hang it on. Otherwise, they wouldn't have protested, even though the protest was absolutely pointless, as we've discussed now. But yes, I do think that something should really come out of this.
Agreed. And also for those who are watching this video, let us know your thoughts on anything we have discussed in the comment section below. Ian, thank you as always. Be sure to like and subscribe to the racingnews365.com YouTube channel, especially if you want to be included in our latest prize giveaway. As well as that, check out part 2 of our exclusive documentary into Moto3 sensation Colin Via. The only thing left to say is enjoy the Austrian Grand Prix, everyone. We will see you on Sunday. See you later.
Take care, folks.